Now, I know that there's a lot of people out there who are going to say that plastic is bad. It's bad for the environment, it's bad for our health, it's something that we shouldn't really be messing around with. But I want you to realize two things. A thing is neither good nor bad. It simply is. It's how it is used, or rather misused, that makes the difference. Always remember that people make a living off of fear and distraction, or in other words, scaring the crap out of you. But keep in mind that things are rarely as bad as other people make it seem. Plastic is used in thousands of applications, which you can't argue are a bad thing. From applications like IV systems to life rafts, it's used in bulletproof glass, and it occupies about 70% of a modern vehicle, leading to more fuel efficiency and, of course, less emissions. Nothing is either good nor bad. It's simply a tool. But far too often when people abuse a tool and they're looking to deflect blame away from themselves, they'll blame the tool rather than taking that responsibility themselves. All tools have their pros and their cons, their advantages and disadvantages, their strengths and their weaknesses. In fact, that's very consistent with everything in the world. And if somebody tells you something differently, chances are they're probably trying to sell you something. Now take, for example, a scalpel. Now in the hands of a trained surgeon, this could be a life-saving instrument. But put it in the hands of a villain with a vendetta, and you've got yourself a deadly weapon. This is very true of plastics as well. Plastics are a tool that can be used or misused. Now if you take an object, any object, and you just throw it into the ocean, that's a problem. But actually it makes you the problem, not the object. And when you agitate a group of people who begin to demand for action without really understanding the thing that they're arguing for, this can quickly lead to a mob, a group of people who are calling for change without really understanding the consequences of it. Take, for example, the application of a single-use bag, the kind you find at grocery stores. Well, nobody wants to be wasteful. We don't want to take resources and just throw them away. However, as we've talked about before, there are pros and cons to everything. So in the state of New Jersey, they decided to ban single-use bags throughout the entire state. And you might wonder if that had any impact on the use of plastics within the state. Well, it actually did. It had an increase, not the projected decrease that people had hoped. In fact, it had a quite substantial increase. I don't know if you can guess. You think maybe a twofold increase to the amount of plastics that was used within the state? No? You think maybe 3? No. It was actually a 1,500%, a 15x use of plastics throughout the state of New Jersey. Now, people outside of the industry were shocked by this, but people like myself went, yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. Why were they so shocked? Well, it's because they didn't take the time to learn about it. They didn't understand the ramifications or the fact that the multi-use bags actually hold a lot more plastic in them, and they're certainly not permanent. They have to be disposed of as well, and when they are, they consume a lot more plastic in the process. Now, the politicians didn't really understand the industry very well, and they certainly didn't spend much time researching it. They just passed a ban and assumed all would go well. This is something my good friend likes to call security theater. It's when politicians get this idea that they need to pretend to be protecting their constituents, so they stand up and they make big speeches and they pound the table and they act all upset about things. They move some things around, they may change a law or two, but really, they're not actually doing anything. They just make a big performance and they try to trick you into thinking that they're actually accomplishing something. Sometimes they are, but oftentimes it's not to your benefit. Nothing is ever actually as simple as it appears at the surface. When you look into it more than just a passing glance, things tend to get a little bit more complicated. An expert will always see more variation in a system than a hobbyist or a passerby. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people who look at the plastics industry with just a casual glance, and they assume that they're experts at it. They assume that they can cut down contamination by simply banning things like single-use bags. As we've discussed, that doesn't go so well. But unfortunately, in today's reactionary world, people are often motivated simply by watching a 30-second video on YouTube and thinking that they are now an expert, so they run off to become a social warrior. Now, if you want to help, that's great. Please let me know, because there's a lot of problems out there that we need help solving, and there's not enough people to actually lend a hand. So if you want to get involved, let's do it. It sounds great. But step one to that process is actually understanding the industry, understanding the systems, the chemistry behind it, and most people aren't really willing to dive in that deep. They're looking for more instant gratification. They want to just check a box and say, yeah, I'm a social warrior, and it's kind of a problem. Listen, the thing is, I have people I want to leave behind when I'm gone. I want to leave them a better world. And like most people who have people they love, they do want to actually improve things. Now, unfortunately, you'll get a lot of politicians who will see this sort of energy and they'll rush to get in front of it. And they'll pretend that it's their cause and that they're saving the planet simply by reacting to the mob. And of course, how politicians solve these problems is they find a scapegoat and they persecute that scapegoat. And maybe I'm just naive, but I really do believe that together we can build a better future. And that's way better to use our energy on something like that than to tear somebody else down. Oh, while I'm here, I want to point out something really fascinating, something that's actually built into the bedrock of the town of Cheyenne, Wyoming. This is the Capitol building. And at the other end, way down there, this is the Cheyenne Depot, built in 1886 for the Union Pacific Railroad as they expanded westward, creating the Transcontinental Railroad connecting the east to the west and creating the United States as we know it today. What's really interesting about the location of this building is, of course, it's right off the main railroad, the literal Transcontinental Railroad, and the United States government, or specifically Wyoming government, decided to locate right across the city here, at the other end of Capitol Avenue. Both of these buildings represent, well, industry and government, and they're situated at opposite ends of the city so that they could keep an eye on each other. It's basically saying that industry and the government need to constantly keep an eye on each other, sit at each end of the street watching over to make sure that neither one of them misbehaves. It's kind of a poetic architectural flourish to the city, and one that we kind of need to keep in mind today because both still have the potential of wreaking havoc on us poor little citizens. Well, that's all I've got for you today. But make sure you come back and check out the channel later because we're working on some really cool things. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get all our latest content. And remember, go out there and do something cool today.